daily lives, that will change history, 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 that will change history. That will be the most beautiful day.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for our Ukraine war report for day 162. We are now on in this ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Current date is August 4th, 2022. It's now the 5th in Ukraine. So I can say with that, good morning to Ukraine. Good morning to everybody in Europe. We're going to get started this evening, as usual, going through our primary headlines, our key topics, get everybody filled in on what's been going on for about the past 12 to 24 hours. We'll then hop over into our community aggregated news and get caught up in all of the reports that have been brought to us by our wonderful community members from over on the Discord server. There's a link to that in the description below if anybody would like to join. And then, of course, we'll cap everything off with our open source reports from Live UA Map, and then hop over into a little bit of a Q&A session from our live chats on YouTube, Twitch, and Discord. If you haven't already, please hit that like button. Best way to get the algorithm's attention. If you like this content, share this stream with your friends. Best way to get this information out there into the hands of more people. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to get notified when new videos and streams go live. And it's the only way to gain access to our YouTube live chat. Without further ado, we will hop right into tonight's main headlines. Of course, the big breaking story today is that Russian forces have shelled Nikopol in the Dnipro region there. Of course, this is not the first time they have striked that city, but the most recent attacks that have come on that city are very close to Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. 8 people have been killed and 4 have been wounded in Russian artillery shelling in the eastern Ukrainian town of Donetsk in Donetsk region on Thursday. The regional governor has said in a report the shelling hit a public transport stop where people had gathered. The governor for the area, Pavlo Kirilenko, wrote on Telegram in a post earlier today, 3 children were among the wounded, he said in that report. Meanwhile, the UN is conducting a fact-finding mission in response to requests from both Russia and Ukraine after 53 Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed in an explosion at a barracks in a separatist-controlled Olenivka. The warring nations have accused each other of carrying out the attack. Ukraine claims it was a special operation plotted in advance by the Kremlin and carried out by Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. Russia's defense ministry, however, claims the Ukrainian military used U.S.-supplied rockets to strike the prison. A U.S. official accused Moscow of preparing to plant fake evidence to make it look like the recent mass killing of Ukrainian prisoners in an attack on Russian-controlled prison was caused by Ukraine. Kiev and Moscow have traded blame over the strikes on the prison in Kremlin-controlled Olenivka in eastern Ukraine, which Russia said took place overnight on the 29th of July. Amnesty International has said the Ukrainian army is endangering the life of civilians by basing themselves in residential areas in a report rejected by the Ukrainian government representatives as placing blame on it for Russia's invasion. The human rights group researchers found that Ukrainian forces were using some schools and hospitals as bases, firing near houses and sometimes living in residential flats. Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister, Hanna Maliar, accused Amnesty of, quote, distorting the real picture. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky wants to talk directly to China's leader, Xi Jinping, in hopes that China can use its influence with Russia to bring the war to an end. According to a report in the South China Morning Post, Zelensky said, quote, it's a very powerful state, it's a powerful economy, so it can politically, economically influence Russia, and China is also a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So far, China has refused to condemn Russia's invasion, and its president, Xi Jinping, told Putin it would support Russia's, quote, sovereignty and security. In some updates on that, U.S. basketball player Britney Griner, a Moscow court has convicted the basketball player on drug charges, sentencing her to 9 years in prison and a 1 million ruble fine in a politically charged verdict that could lead to a prisoner swap with the United States. Griner, a basketball talent who played in Russia during off seasons from the Phoenix Mercury, was arrested for cannabis possession in Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport in February. The U.S. Senate has ratified Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, voting 95 to 1 in support. The U.S. is the 23rd member state to ratify what would be the most significant expansion of the 30-member alliance since the 1990s as it responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Quote from that report saying the historic vote sends an important signal of the sustained bipartisan U.S. commitment to NATO and to ensuring our allies is prepared to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow, said the U.S. President Joe Biden in a statement. All 30 NATO members must ratify the accession before Finland and Sweden can become members. Ukraine is pulling out its 40 peacekeepers from the NATO-led mission in Kosovo, which totals 3,800 members, according to Ukraine News. In March, Zelensky issued a decree for all missions to return to Ukraine to support the war. Meanwhile, a Russian official in Ukraine has claimed Ukrainian forces are using Western arms to attack the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Europe's largest nuclear plant is now controlled by Russian forces and has been used as a military base, according to Reuters. However, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Ukrainian forces are not firing against Russian forces, lest there be a terrible accident involving the nuclear plant. Reporters were unable to verify battlefield accounts from either side of the war from that region. The first shipment of grain to leave Ukraine under a deal to ease Russia's naval blockade has reached Turkey. The Sierra Leone registered ship Razoni set sail from Odessa port for Lebanon on Monday under an accord brokered by Turkey and the UN. The ship has been inspected by members of the Joint Coordination Center and is now expected to move through the Bosphorus Strait shortly. The Ukrainian president has dismissed the importance of the first grain export shipment from his country since Russia invaded, saying it was carrying a fraction of the crop Kiev must sell to help salvage its shattered economy. In downbeat comments, Zelensky, via video to students in Australia Wednesday, said more time was needed to see whether the grain shipments would follow. The Kremlin said on Thursday that the Turkish brokered deal to unblock Ukrainian grain exports from the Black Sea was not a one-off mechanism, and that it hoped it would continue to work effectively. Again, that's a quote directly from their statement, calling it a one-off mechanism. The deal, which allows for Ukrainian grain to be shipped to world markets via Turkey, must be renewed every 120 days by agreement of the parties. The first shipment of Ukrainian grain to the UK since the war began is expected to arrive in 10 days, says Western officials. Millions of tons of grain have been stuck in Ukraine since Russia invaded just over 6 months ago. NATO members are working closely with defense companies to ensure Ukraine gets more supplies of weapons and equipment to be prepared for the long haul in its war with Russia. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Thursday. Stoltenberg told Reuters in an interview, "We are providing a lot of support, but we need to do even more and be prepared for the long haul." That about sums up our primary headlines for this evening. Big shout out to everybody that is tuning in tonight to take some time out of your day to get caught up on what's going on here. We're now going to switch over to our large screen here so we can see the posts I'm about to bring you here from our community aggregated news from over in the Discord server. Our first post this evening comes from Fallen Rays, one of our moderators over on the Discord server. Thank you so much, Fallen, for sending this over. This comes from thehill.com. This talks a little bit about Zelensky saying he wants to talk about the Russian invasion with China's president directly. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said he wants to discuss the Russian invasion of his country with the Chinese President Xi Jinping directly and said he hoped that China might review its attitude towards Russia in the light of its invasion of Ukraine. A quote directly from that report saying, "I would like to talk directly. I had one conversation with Xi. That was a year ago," Zelensky said in an interview with the South China Morning Post. Our next post here comes from Tiger Eye, Miss Tiger Eye, over on the Discord server. This talks about why China is not sanctioning Taiwan's key chip industry. Now, as some of you may know, over the past about 24 to 48 hours, the South Pacific has heated up quite intensely, with China launching military drills in and around Taiwan's naval space there. And the rhetoric has been ramped up, I would say, to 11 in some cases. Let's take a look at what this article has to say about Taiwan's chip industry and China's lack of sanctions against it. China has turned the familiar playbook of trade restrictions following U.S. House Representative Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. After Pelosi proceeded with her trip to the democratically ruled land, in spite of Beijing's warnings, Chinese authorities suspended imports of Taiwanese citrus fruits and fish and exports of sand. State media also announced that major military drills around Taiwan would start on Thursday, framing the exercise as a, quote, reunification operation, as they're calling it there. The trade moves have been widely interpreted as political actions aimed at pressuring the island, which Beijing considers a breakaway province that should be, quote, reunified by force if necessary, although Chinese officials cited biosecurity and other trade-related grounds. Beijing's latest apparent attempt at economic coercion, however, conspicuously left Taiwan's most valuable export of all untouched: semiconductors. That is most likely because China depends on Taiwan's export of the critical components almost as much as the island does itself. For Beijing, targeting Taiwan's semiconductor industry would come at the cost of inflicting significant harm on itself. Our next post here comes from Yoroko Izo. This comes from Agnes Calamard. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. This is a verified Twitter account here. It talks about Ukrainian fighting tactics and dangerous civilians. This has been a big report today. Pretty controversial report, I might add. The authorities should immediately locate its forces away from populated areas or evacuate civilians from where the military is operating. Such tactics, though, do not in any way justify Russia's war crimes. Of course, we have seen many accounts, many reports of Ukraine launching mandatory evacuations from populated areas for this exact purpose. That's just part of war, you know. In the combat theater, there are people that decide to stay behind. Sometimes forces need to operate out of civilian infrastructure. This is known to happen. And again, they're saying here that basically that the Ukrainian forces are putting the civilian population in harm's way in some cases. Again, this report comes from amnesty.org. The Ukrainian government today fired back against these statements. Again, it says here, such tactics, though, do not in any way justify Russian war crimes, of course. We have a post here coming at us from Kayuka. Actually, we have a few here. It shows explosion/shelling during an alleged funeral. Let's take a look here. You can see a picture here of some smoke rising from this strike that occurred. This is in Donetsk. There are already 5 dead and 6 wounded in Donetsk. It's reported that today the funeral of the terrorist and traitor Olga Kachura, call sign Korsa, is taking place there. So that's very interesting news there. We have a few videos showing some damaged buildings here. Get some audio here for you guys. So you can see this was taken right after that attack occurred. We have tonight our first installment of what I'm calling the Kayuka Report. We'll get to that here in a few moments. He's been very kind to compile some news for us in an organized manner, so I can quickly reference it for you guys here. So we'll get to that in just a few moments. However, I have a few more posts before we get to that. This one, very interesting here. This comes from Nexta on Twitter. It says the Twitter account for the Russian propaganda state media RIA Novosti has been blocked in 27 EU countries and Great Britain. You can see here a picture of the account suspension notification here. Account withheld, it says. Another post here coming from Kayuka. This comes from Ukrainska Pravda. It talks about in the Kherson region, Ukrainian armed forces destroy Russian warehouses in Chornobaivka and Berislav. It says here, head of the Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian Parliament, Committee on National Security and Defense, has said that Ukrainian defenders have destroyed 2 Russian ammunition depots in Kherson Oblast. The source is coming from that head of the parliament there, Alexander Zevinich, on Facebook. Quote directly from that report saying Ukrainian defenders have knocked out 2 enemy ammunition depots in the Kherson Oblast. Here is our Ministry of Defense from the UK intelligence update for the 4th of August. Again, coming at us from Kayuka. Let's take a look at this. Again, this is for the 4th of August out of Ukraine. This is generated by the United Kingdom's Defense Ministry of Defense here. Ukraine's missile and artillery units continue to target Russian military strongholds, personnel, clusters, logistical support bases, and ammunition depots, which will highly likely impact Russian military logistical resupply and put pressure on Russian military combat support elements. On the 3rd of August 2022, the first vessel with Ukrainian grain arrived at the Bosphorus Strait. Having transited the Black Sea from Odessa, it is almost certain the success of this transit will result in more frequent transits in both directions. Clearing the backlog caused by the blockade that has been in place since around February 22, when the invasion began, of course, will remain a logistical challenge. It says here, finishing up, Russian forces have almost certainly positioned pyramidal radar reflectors in the water near the recently damaged Antonovsky Bridge and by the recently damaged nearby rail bridge, both of which cross over the Dnipro River in Kherson, southern Ukraine. The radar reflectors are likely being used to hide the bridge from synthetic aperture radar imagery and possibly missile targeting equipment. This highlights the threat Russia feels from the increased range and precision of Western-supplied systems. Again, speaking mainly to those HIMAR rocket systems that we've heard so much about over recent weeks. We have another post here coming from Kayuka. It talks about Ukraine under pressure in the east as NATO chief says Russia must not win. Kiev, August 4th from Reuters. Ukraine said on Thursday it had been forced to cede some territory in the east of the country in face of a Russian offensive. And the head of NATO military alliance said Moscow must not be allowed to win the war. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky this week described the pressure his armed forces were under in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine as, quote, hell. He spoke of fierce fighting around the town of Edvika and the fortified village of Pisky, where Kiev has acknowledged its Russian foes' partial success in recent days. So the Russian forces have been able to grind forward in some areas. Our next post here coming from Pyrotech. Talks about the Britney Griner situation, found guilty in Russian court, sentenced to 9 years in prison. Let's take a look here. Inside her metal courtroom cage, a Solomon Stone-faced Britney Griner learned how long she'll be locked away in Russian prison if the Biden administration can't broker a deal to secure her release. A Russian judge handed down a harsh 9-year sentence on Thursday, rejecting the WNBA star's emotional apology and plea for leniency for the honest mistake of bringing less than a gram of cannabis oil into the country last February. Griner was found guilty of drug possession and drug smuggling with criminal intent. The judge fined her 1 million rubles, roughly around $16,300 in addition to sentencing Griner to just shy of the maximum 10 years that she was eligible to receive. Next post here coming from Tiger Eye 912 talks about Ukraine's armed forces eliminate 47 Russian soldiers, 7 enemy equipment units in the south. In the south, the armed forces of Ukraine have eliminated 47 Russian soldiers and 7 enemy vehicles, as the Operational Command South posted on Facebook. The situation in the operational zone of the southern Bud direction is complicated and dynamic, but the defense forces keep it under control. The missile and artillery units of the armed forces of Ukraine continue exercising fire control over transport arteries and logistical routes of Russian troops in the captured territories of Kherson. Another post here coming from Tiger Eye. Thank you so much for this. It comes from the Government of Canada website, canada.ca. Defense Minister Anita Anand announces deployment of Canadian armed forces to train Ukrainian soldiers in the United Kingdom. Very interesting report here. It says the Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Anita Anand, announced today that Canada has authorized the deployment of Canadian Armed Forces personnel to train new recruits from the Armed Forces of Ukraine as they seek to increase the size of their ground forces in the face of Russia's ongoing, unprovoked, unjustifiable, illegal invasion. We're now going to switch over, I think, to our Cayuga Power Poster report for today. We have actually one more here coming from a Rat Lady that I'd like to post for you guys here. This or show you guys here. This comes from Newsweek, Newsweek.com. It talks about Belarus tests troop readiness near Ukraine border. Let's take a look at this video here, which we have for you. It says Belarus launched military drills amid the Ukraine war. According to the Belarusian Defense Ministry, it was to, quote, check troops' readiness during a rapidly changing situation. As we know, of course, the Russians and the Belarusians often mask military drills for readiness as, or sorry, they often mask, pre-invasion activities as drills and training. We've seen that right up until the invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Oh, of course it's muted here. Let me start this over so we can hear this here.
Если честно, я не думал, что эта операция затянется таким образом. Но я не настолько погружен в эту проблему, чтобы сказать, по плану там у них идет у россиян, как они говорят, или так, как я это ощущаю. Я еще раз подчеркиваю, я это ощущаю так, что операция эта затянулась.
И отдельно я хочу обратиться сегодня к гражданам Беларуси, к людям и гражданским, и в погонах. Вас втягивают в войну.
So in a statement here from Zelensky directly to the people of Belarus, he's saying that, basically the people of Belarus, both civilians and those in the military, are being drawn into the war.
И даже
He says
активнее, чем это было в феврале,
even more actively than in February and in the
в
spring
Кремле за
months.
вас уже все решили.
The Kremlin has
Ваши
already
жизни
decided
для
everything, he says. For you, your lives are worth nothing to them,
ничего
he
не
says.
стоит. Но вы не рабы.
But you are not slaves or
И не
cannon fodder,
пушечное
he
мясо.
says.
Беспрецедентное политическое и санкционное давление со стороны так называемого коллективного Запада подталкивает нас к тому, чтобы ускорить объединительный процесс. Ведь сообща проще минимизировать ущерб от принимаемых незаконных.
Says here, Belarus has been testing the readiness of its troops near its border with Ukraine. Kiev said Thursday, shortly after Ukraine's foreign minister vowed to sever diplomatic ties with the country should its army intervene in the ongoing war with Russia. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Army said in a statement on Facebook that some units of Belarus Special Operations Forces have held combat readiness checks in recent days. Several Belarusian units in Volhynia and Polisa were also tasked with strengthening protection of a section of the Belarusian-Ukrainian border in the Brest and Gomel regions, the statement had said. Again, thank you, Rat Lady, for sending that over to us on the Discord. Our next up here, we have our daily Cayuga report, as I'm calling it, our Cayuga roundup. We could call it that, maybe. So first up, we had the UK Ministry of Defence updates. We just covered that. I also showed you guys the explosion slash shelling during the alleged funeral that we saw there. Here is some more context for that Belarusian advance here. This talks about chatter about a possible new Russian/Belarusian advance in northern Ukraine. Says Joint Forces Commander Russia will no longer advance on Kiev. Defenses are in place. So this comes from the Joint Forces Commander for Ukraine. Lieutenant General Serhiy Naiv Nayev, commander of the joint forces, assured Ukrainians that Russian forces would not advance on Kiev for a second time, as the armed forces of Ukraine are now much better prepared for a possible offensive. Quote from Nayev, we have analyzed the previous actions of Russians on the Kiev front, and having studied this experience, provided for an adequate response. Defensive positions are located exactly in places with the greatest probability of an offensive by Russian forces. Analyzing possible Russian actions, we have created a comprehensive system of weapon and artillery coverage, which will be able to defeat the enemy both on approach and in close quarters of its battle formations. In turn, the population has felt the burden of Russian occupation fully supports the armed forces of Ukraine and other military branches and law enforcement agencies. I am sure that the Russians will no longer advance on this front. We are doing everything possible to make this confidence real. And then here from the Kiev Independent, it says here, General Staff, Belarus checks combat readiness of its military. Belarus armed forces are strengthening their positions on the border with Ukraine in its Brest and Homel oblasts, according to the General Staff, the armed forces of Ukraine. So there is some chatter, possibly, of some readiness increases there from Belarus. And another report here coming from Kayuka's roundup here. Allegedly, bomb threats were called in several cities across Ukraine. Threats turned out to be fake, but evacuations and all did happen. We have a post here. People are being evacuated from the station building and the central department store in Ternopil. There is information about a possible provocation and planted explosives, says the mayor of the city, Serhei Nadal, who writes in that post. There's a few more coming from separate cities there as well. Another one here coming from Kayuka. It says the United States have completed formation of a constellation of satellites for the direction of missile strikes, it says. Let's take a look here. The United States, let's get this out of the way. The United States completes the formation of a constellation of satellites for the detection of missile strikes. It says here on August 4th at 13:29 Kiev time, the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket launched from the SLC-41 site to the U.S. Air Force Base at Cape Canaveral. The carrier will launch the sixth 4.5-ton satellite of the SBIRS, Space-Based Infrared System, project for the Space Systems Command of the U.S. Space Force into geotransition orbit. The U.S. military uses these satellites to monitor events on Earth in the infrared range. The payload is mainly used to warn of a missile attack, early detection of launches of ballistic and other types of missiles. The equipment can determine flight trajectories, identify combat units and false targets, and also issue instructions for interception. A reconnaissance mode over the theater of war in the infrared range is also possible. So that would no doubt come in handy, very useful to the Ukrainian forces on the ground there. And then in the last post here, this comes a small update from just about 4 hours ago here from Kayuka. Seems the Izium front is seeing a bit of movement. He said, I mentioned Russia pushing the Bayrak, Huska-Rivivka, a line west of Izium, but seems they have lost the south of Izium in return. Let's take a look at here at the post coming from Euromaidan Press. According to Ukraine's General Staff, Ukraine regained territory around Izium, the blue zone there. Bohorodinchi, Dmitrivka, and a few other regions there are recaptured. Fighting is now going on for Sulihivka and Brazivka. You can see here on the map where some of that activity is occurring. To everybody that posted articles in the Situation Room today, big shout out to you guys. A big shout out to Kayuka, our power poster, for sending over that detailed roundup of today's events. We're now going to switch over to the not the Situation Room, but the live UA map here, our open source reports here from live UA map. We'll start here at the 9-hour mark. An explosion was reported in Novokhovka. You can see where that's located on the map, in Russian-held territory there. You can see a picture on screen of some smoke columns rising from those strikes. I believe we also have a video, though, so I'll show you that as well. Again, just showing basically the same thing, smoke plumes rising from those strikes that reportedly happened today in Novokhovka, about 9 hours ago. 6 hours ago, explosions and fire reported at a forest near Novomachika, Kherson region. You can see here on the screen a picture of some smoke rising above those strikes. So reportedly a forest fire is occurring there as well as a result of those strikes. You can see where those are located on the map here, not too far from those other blasts in Novokhovka. 5 hours ago here, heavy Russian shelling in Kharkiv occurred today. You can see where that's located on the map here. Let's take a look at our source here. I believe we have a video to show you. This is no doubts heavy shelling here, as you can hear. Apologies to our headphone users. So it looked like a pretty large barrage there of incoming shelling. Let's take a look again. You can see some flashes in the sky from that shelling occurring. Five hours ago, fire and explosions reported in Donetsk as well. I believe this is also on Russian-held territory. You can see a fire and some plumes of smoke rising above from those explosions there. And you can see where that's located on the map here. I believe that is, yep, indeed on Russian-occupied territory. 5 hours ago here, it says at least 3 casualties as a result of Russian shelling in Shevchenkovsky, the industrialny districts of Kharkiv. Kind of a mouthful there, that report. But you can see here where that was located on the map. So 3 casualties. 3 people lost their lives as a result of shelling in that region today, about 5 hours ago. And 21 minutes ago here. So this came right as we started tonight's report. Explosions reported in Zaporizhia. So that region has been very hot over the past 12 to 24 hours here. You can see more explosions have been reported. Again, that comes about 21 minutes ago. Those explosions came in. That about sums up tonight's reports. We'll now have a little bit of a Q&A with our live chats over on YouTube and Twitch and Discord. So make sure to sound off in the chat where you're tuning in from tonight. Let us know any questions or comments you have on the ongoing situation in Ukraine. And, let us know how you're doing this evening, and we'll read those off in the live chat. Coffee No Sugar, thank you so much for tuning in. Says, oh, wow, I haven't seen this in a long while. Well, we've been here. We haven't gone anywhere, but thank you so much for tuning back in. I hope your night is going well. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to get caught up on what's going on in Ukraine. Epimoo, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Always good to have our Scotsman hanging out with us in the live chat, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, Epi. Katlenberg asks, Nemico, did you hear about the warehouse fire near Moscow yesterday? No, I was actually out of commission yesterday, but I'll take a look at that, and maybe if anybody has any reports to send over about that warehouse fire, I can look into that, possibly mention that on tomorrow's report. Mike Barry, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Jillian, thank you so much for stopping by. Hello to both of you guys. Annette, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Michelle Welch, almost didn't recognize you because you changed the profile picture there, Michelle. Lost B83, as always, glad to have you. Access Denied, always good to have you. Astrid, thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Kayuka, of course, always on task here, sends me over a article about that warehouse fire here. Let's take a look. It says the burning warehouse of OZON can no longer be saved. The governor of Moscow region, Andriy Vorobyov, says the Ministry of Emergency Situations reported that data on the victims of the fire is not yet available. At the same time, the media say at least 1 victim has been reported at that warehouse fire. We also have a video that he sent over here of that warehouse fire burning. You can see here it matches right up with that picture we just saw here. Moscow is 50,000 square meters. The area of the fire at the OZON warehouse near Moscow is 50,000 square meters. So that's the amount of area that fire was burning. So a pretty large blaze there burning at that warehouse that you can see here on screen. Let's take a look. Look how huge that fire was that broke out there. Still remains to be seen if that was sabotage or if that was a strike by the Ukrainians directly. Katlenberg says Russians must really ignore OSHA safety guidelines. Buildings keep exploding. Yeah, they need a few safety inspectors over there, I guess, eh? Kayuka asks, so what about those weird top attack videos Ukrainians released? No one can pinpoint what weapon it might have been. I keep hearing about those. I actually have not seen the videos myself. I don't have any information on that at this time. Possible. No one can pinpoint what weapon it might have been. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. And of course, he sends that over super quick here. Let's take a look. This comes from UA Weapons Tracker, actually. They've been a pretty good source of videos and content here coming out of the combat theater here. You can see some video on screen. We'll rewind that here for you. So it seems to be some kind of top attack missile here. It was reportedly carrying Russian officers. I mean, that could be like a javelin, possibly. I mean, I'm not sure. You can see that car does a flip as it tries to evade the area there. I mean, that's really fast. That could be possibly like a javelin missile system. I mean, those, I'm not sure. It could have came from even aircraft, possibly. It says the use of a mysterious top attack munition by Ukrainian forces. See here, seen targeting a vehicle reportedly carrying Russian officers. I believe we have another video as well, I think. We can take a look at this as well. So, okay, let's get that music muted here. A Russian infantry fighting vehicle filmed being hit with an unknown top attack munition. Though it looks somewhat similar to previously seen SM ART submunitions, some aspects as speed and angle are different here. Possibly we are seeing something not documented before. Yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. You could definitely tell. I mean, the velocity in which that round comes in is very, very quick. Yeah, I'm not too sure. Again, I'm not a weapons expert by any stretch of the imagination. My first guess is javelin system, but you know that looks too fast to be possibly a javelin system, and I don't see a missile contrail until like the very end. Yanni says, Nemico, when you have a chance, can we get a separate channel for Taiwan, China in the Discord? Yes, I actually plan to do that, as well as we're getting a cam stream up for Taiwan as well. It depends on where things go over the next few days to a week. If it continues to heat up in the region, I'm definitely going to get some coverage going of the Taiwan-China situation, because it's a very big deal. As U.S. military analysts have said in the past, you know, Russia is the temporary challenge, and China is the long-term threat. And I believe that's starting to come to fruition now as we see kind of the rhetoric ramping up in the area, in the region there, in the South Pacific. So yeah, I definitely plan to have some coverage and some outlets for you guys in the Discord server to be able to discuss that situation. Doompie says, tuning in from the Netherlands, still riding the bicycle, so won't have the live weather reports, unfortunately. That's all good, Doompie. You get those to us almost every single night, so you could take the night off tonight, Doompie. I'm pretty sure the weather's not going anywhere in Ukraine. Catlinberg, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Kender, if you're still there, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Access denied. Not a Q&A, but with how heavily emphasized the heavy use of artillery is during this war, I sometimes get World War I vibes. I also have gotten those same vibes. Access denied, so I'm right there with you. Hugo, thank you so much for tuning in from LA. Just tuning in, he says. Hey, Nemico. Hey to you, Hugo. Thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Lori, thank you so much for stopping by. Astrid. OG Smiley 69 says gas in Michigan by me was $3.89. Yeah, those fuel prices have come down a lot, nationwide. Again, they're almost at pre-invasion levels. So we hope that continues, that trend continues in the coming months. And again, only time will tell if those prices do remain low. We hope that they do, of course. Andy, hello to you. Thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Mike Berry asked, what's in the warehouse? Actually, I'm not sure what was stored in that warehouse, but that would be a pretty enlightening piece of information. Might give us some clues towards if it was possibly struck by by the Ukrainian military. That's possible, or if it was like a sabotage operation. OZON is, as Kayuka says, OZON is pretty much Russia's Amazon, and that was their biggest warehouse. So a lot of different stuff burnt down. So it's not just it's not just like one product being held in there. It's like very similar to what we see here in the, in the West with Amazon, like an Amazon warehouse. Thank you, Kayuka, for sending that information over snappy quick there. Katlenberg, thank you so much for, again, stopping by tonight. He says it might be needed until Z gets himself reelected this fall. Yep, possibly. William Fredericks also says China will be the next big event. We hope not, but we have to be prepared for such an eventuality. Katlenberg, thank you so much for the support as well tonight. That means a lot to me. LD429 with a little Kiev weather report says 67 degrees F in Kiev, 19.4 C. Well, thank you LD429 for filling in for Doompie there with a little bit of a weather report, a temperature report from Kiev. Raindrop, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Speedy Squirrel, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Desmo Bluefire says, I'm so used to furry VTubing. I forgot non-furry VTubing is a thing. Well, thank you so much, Desmo, for tuning in tonight and appreciating our little setup here, which will be changed soon. We are actually planning to make some upgrades to the format here and just kind of how we bring you guys these broadcasts. I've been working on that in the background the past few weeks here, so I'm pretty pumped to bring you guys those developments here in the future. Tango Down, thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Glad to have you, as always, in the chat. PB&J says, did you see anything about a UA POW camp that was shelled? Russia is claiming U.S. shelled it. I believe you mean that Ukraine shelled it. Fact or fiction? Well, yeah, I believe if you're talking about the Ukrainian POW prisoner camp, yeah, there is mixed reports. The Russians are saying that the Ukrainians, for some reason, struck it. The Ukrainians are saying that it was a premeditated attack by the Russians and that they struck it. We covered this a little bit earlier in the show. If you want to rewind and look at kind of some of what our coverage was on that situation, but I think it'll take some time before we get a concrete investigation ran on what happened in that POW camp. With that, everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning in this evening. That about sums up tonight's broadcast. We'll be back here tomorrow night around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as usual, 3 a.m. Ukraine time. If you're looking for any of the links to anything, you can find that in the description below. If you can't find it there, you can find it over on our Discord server. There's a link to that in the description below. Everybody's welcome to join over there. Let me see here. What else? Of course, make sure to hit that like button, get the algorithm's attention. That's always important. If you like this content, share the stream. It's the best way to get this information out into the hands of more people. Make sure you're subscribed so you get notified when new videos and streams go live. And then, of course, it's the only way to join into our YouTube live chat. I'll be uploading this video to YouTube as soon as it's done. So if any of you missed this stream or you want to go back and rewatch it, it will be available over on the YouTube channel for you guys to watch the full report. I believe that about sums it up. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Until next time, everybody, you are watching Nemico Network.
Something that will change our daily lives, that will change history.